Great to see these smiling faces this morning, and welcome people on Zoom. My name is Tree Muldrow, and I'm a Philadelphia resident, a member of Crossroads, and I just want to welcome everyone. We had a glorious day and evening yesterday. We got to meet some wonderful people, but first, I would like to acknowledge where we are in Philadelphia, which is land Lenape, excuse me, I'm sorry. It's Lenape land, and I want to acknowledge that. And I want to take a moment of silence to think of where we are, what we're doing, and what our spirits are. Thank you so much.
And just echoing Tree, I also want to welcome you. I'm Phoebe Jones. Coordinate the work here at the Crossroads Women's Center. And we had a wonderful kickoff event yesterday with the Dee Dee Purse House workshop and with Vijay Kumar, and a great, really fun party last night. This is the grand opening of our new center. We were on Maplewood Mall in Germantown for 25 years. A little house that probably would have fit in about the corner of this space. So we really expanded, come up in the world, as they say. So we want to welcome you. Thank you for coming. Thank the participants on Zoom. And it's going to be, you know, a wonderful weekend. And glad you all are here.
Hi everybody, welcome. First speaking with, Jane Wellford. I'm from San Francisco Bay Area, a lonely land. And first, Sidney Ross-Risden is going to speak with us first from Give Us Back Our Children, and from Philadelphia. And she's from Los Angeles. So.
Thank you, Jane, and good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm a mother and a grandmother based in Los Angeles, which has the third highest rate of child removal among big U.S. cities. For many years, I also worked as a nurse. One day I was sent to fill in the newborn nursery, where they were short-staffed. I went to pick up a tiny newborn who hadn't been taken out to see its mother. I was stopped by the charge nurse, who said, "Don't cuddle that one. He's going to foster care where he won't get picked up much." The cold cruelty of the system hit me hard. This was during the period from 1982 to 2003, when U.S. federal funding for removing children from families was increased 20,000%, from $25 million to $5 billion. States took funding from welfare benefits to pay for huge increases in foster care, which has become a huge industry in the U.S. The devastating cost to children of being separated from their mothers, grandmothers, and other primary caregivers wasn't counted at all. Black and Indigenous children especially were and are still far more likely to be taken by child welfare than white kids. Over half of all Black children in the U.S., 53%, will experience a child welfare investigation by the time they reach the age of 18. Following the lead of our sisters in Philadelphia.
Sid.
Yeah.
You're speaking too fast for the interpreter.
No, she's fine.
Oh, no, that's for the Spanish interpreter.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the other one. This is the one with them seat.
Yeah.
That's it, because then they've got you straight on.
Yeah, but I have to be. Is that better? Yeah.
You're great.
It is, it's on Zoom.
Am I starting again, or can I go from where I was? Anyway, following the lead of our sisters in Philadelphia, the Global Women's Strike in Los Angeles formed DCFS Give Us Back Our Children in 2009. It's a self-help group of mothers, a few fathers, grandmothers, some of whom are here today, and we organized together to fight this monstrous separation of children from families who love them. Led by women of color, with personal experience with LA's child welfare system, we campaigned to end the removal of children from families who love them because of poverty, incarceration, and domestic violence against the mother. And 4, resources to keep families together. We've accompanied mothers and grandmothers to children's court. We had big protests outside children's court, loud and lively press conferences, supported opening the courts in Los Angeles and more. Finding that the number of parents wanting information was greater than we could meet individually, DCFS Give Us Back Our Children created our Know Your Rights booklet in English and Spanish. It starts with answers developed by people in our group with first-hand experience, and we launched it in 2019. We also plan to meet with the director of LA DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services, to press, among other things, for copies to be available to any parent who wants it in children's court. In 2021, together with Give Us Back Our Children in Philadelphia, Support Not Separation in Britain, Alexandria House, A New Way of Life, Social Workers Ending Poverty Together, which is part of the National Welfare Rights Union, we formed the International Give Us Back Our Children Network. Our first demand, resources and services first. Don't take children because we're poor. We also demand stop fast-track adoptions, stop charging mothers with failure to protect when we're the victims of domestic violence, and mandatory reporting, demands for housing and medical services, and remove mothers' names from a permanent list that's kept in every state of parents who are abusive and therefore should never get a job that has anything to do with children. It's called the Child Registry. And if people would like more, there are flyers in the back, and there's more. Also, last year, we worked for successful passage of the Comlager Bill, a bill that changed California Welfare and Institutions Code to say that poverty cannot be counted alone as child neglect. And this was a huge victory, and we're glad to see that other states are beginning to do the same thing. And in fact, in Philadelphia, they want to do away with the category of neglect altogether.
Yes. Yes.
This bill was introduced by formerly incarcerated women working with their congressperson. And we organized to get letters of support. We had people testify in Sacramento, which is our state capital, and we're just ecstatic when it passed. I can't tell you how exciting it was to see that it could actually happen. Another important bill that we found out has passed was introduced by a state legislator because of the racism of the system. And he wanted to see what could be done. And his bill also passed, and it changes the rules for mandatory reporting. It says that teachers and dentists and whoever, social workers, can't report a family for abuse just because they're poor. And so we're really glad to see this as a trend that's happening. And we're excited by the recommendations that have come out in Philadelphia. And we hope everybody will join us on Monday. Everybody who's here, there's going to be a protest outside the Philadelphia family court system. demanding that the changes that an important committee that Richard Wexler chaired on changes that need to be made in child welfare are actually implemented here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sidney. That's very important to hear from Sidney what's going on here, because this is kicking off our first panel, which is Take Away Our Poverty, Not Our Children. For those of you who just joined, it's going to be a panel followed by a discussion or a workshop. Get it right. Okay. And just to say that we've got a number of speakers from around the globe, including online speakers as well as those of us who are here who've managed to get here to Philadelphia despite the odds. Still got a bit of a voice despite the fires. Our next speaker is actually online, and it's Jordan Harmon. I hope Jordan is ready. She. Indigenous Environmental Network, the Muscogee Creek Nation. So can we welcome Jordan Harmon?
Okay, Mr. Jordan Chowchikaros, Jogi Amalaididados. My name's Jordan Harmon. I'm calling in from the Muscogee Creek Nation Reservation in Oklahoma. And thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this and allowing me to jump in on Zoom. I'm so sorry that I will have to leave the panel early. I won't be able to stay because I'm rushing over to the airport today and leaving for an international flight later this afternoon. But I'm always really happy to talk about this issue that I was asked to talk about, which is ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act. And so my position is with the Indigenous Environmental Network as a policy analyst and legislative advocate. And I'll try to speak slow enough for the translators. I know it's hard, especially with the type of topics we're talking about. So I really appreciate the translators. Everybody always does such a good job. And I'm speaking too fast. You can say it in the chat and I'll see it because I can see the chat, and I'll try to speak slower. I started off as a tribal attorney. I did practice family law and tribal court for about 5 years, and then I shifted over into policy advocacy. And so this topic is very important, I think, to the Women in Poverty conference, and it's really good and interesting to hear about all the different ways that parents are advocating for themselves. And so one thing that's happening here is a very huge threat to Native families here in the United States, and that is this Supreme Court case called Brackeen v. Holland that is challenging the validity of the Indian Child Welfare Act. So what has happened in history is that Native children have been historically removed from their homes, starting about in the 1800s. There is, sorry, there's some echo on me. So starting about the 1800s with the boarding school era of assimilation. So there's been periods of Native American genocide in the United States. The removal era where my tribe was removed from our homelands in the southeast United States and relocated here in Oklahoma. That then established the reservation boundaries that we have today. And during that era, it was very common then for children to be kidnapped from their homes and placed into boarding schools or placed into white homes in order to be raised up in white society. And girls would be put into like domestic work, housekeeping, things like that, and then men would be farm workers, things like that. This era actually lasted all the way up into the 1970s. And it sort of transformed via the child welfare services, sort of picked up where these boarding schools had left off. And the boarding school era actually lasted well into the 1950s and 60s. And during that time of the 1900s is when child welfare programs started to take over. And at first, they were, white-run institutions, and they very much viewed Native children being raised in their homes as something like abuse or like a negative thing, and that it was more appropriate for Native children to be raised in English-speaking homes. It was more appropriate for them to be raised in white families. And part of the reason for this was poverty. So as we know, families are often judged because of poverty, and this is used as a justification to remove children. Another reason was cultural differences and the way children are raised, the way that they're spoken to. Oftentimes, it's common to cook meals outside over a fire. It's common to have multi-generational households with not just grandmas, but cousins and aunts living in one household. And this is not due to poverty all the time. This is due to cultural ways of living. And so those were viewed as reasons why children shouldn't live in this household. It got to the point where it was actually reported by Child Services that up to 35% of Native children, and this is in the 1970s, up to 35% of Native children across the entire country were in foster care. And the number is actually probably higher than that. And that up to 85% of those children were placed in non-Indigenous homes. So we're talking about a massive, and in Canada, the same thing was happening, and they called it the 1960s scoop, where an entire generation of children is considered pretty much lost to the system from that era. And now you'll have sort of today you sort of have these homecoming of children who were adopted into white families, finding their Native families. And we just had a family reunion in Oklahoma where somebody had, found a son that had been adopted during this era, and he was came to this family reunion. He's like, I'm so happy to be here. I never even knew I was Muscogee. I had to find out through these documents, and I was finally able to find out and find my way home. And so studies show that when Native children are forced out of their communities into non-Indian homes, that it leads to loss of culture, it leads to loss of self-confidence, it leads to identity crises, it leads to depression, it leads to increased suicides in Native children, and it also leads to loss of culture and a loss of sovereignty for tribes as well. And so through a lot of advocacy, in 1978, the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed. And this was passed specifically to address those issues with the mass removal of Native children. And so, what the Indian Child Welfare Act does, it's called ICWA, is ICWA, is so if I say ICWA, that's what I mean. And what it does is number one, it recognizes and the inherent jurisdiction of tribal nations over their children. And so what I didn't do at the beginning of this was go over the concept of tribal sovereignty, because if I did that, I would probably take up half an hour. So for those of you not familiar with the idea of tribal sovereignty, our tribal nations have a government-to-government relationship with the United States, and this has been recognized since the time of colonization. And that is what empowers us to have treaties with the federal government. We have jurisdiction over our own lands that is separate from states and separate from the federal government. and we're considered our own quasi-sovereign entities, and we're actually citizens of our nations for those who are members of federally recognized tribes and citizens of the United States. And part of that sovereignty is this inherent jurisdiction over children. And the way that they have taken tribal rights is there's this like body of sovereign rights that every single nation has. And Congress has stated that all of those are preserved until the federal government takes them away, basically. And so the federal government has decided to re-recognize tribal jurisdiction over their children. It also establishes standards that say, placement preference standards that say when a child is in state court, not tribal court, but state court, in state jurisdiction, and they do need to be placed in the foster care, that first they have to diligently look for family members. They have to diligently look for foster homes within the child's tribe. Then they have to diligently look for native foster homes, and only then can they place the child in a non-native home. And there are also increased standards for what it takes to remove a child from their home. So for example, under the ICWA, it is illegal to consider poverty or socioeconomic status when determining when to remove a child. There's increased standards for termination of parental rights. There's actually opportunities to reverse termination if the process under ICWA was not followed correctly. There's many, many protections now to keep Indian children within their communities and within their homes, and to prevent that type of discrimination that Native families were experiencing. Under this, there have been a lot of attacks against the ICWA, and right now, there's a white foster family, and many states in the United States have challenged the ICWA in court. This case has now gotten to the Supreme Court. It's called Kane v. Harmon. They're challenging ICWA based on equal protection in the 14th Amendment and anti-commandeering.
Georgia, I'm truly sorry to interrupt, but we're giving speakers 7 minutes. So a few more seconds, would you mind to wrap up? Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, no, I didn't realize that I had 7 minutes. Okay, so to wrap up really quickly, there's this law firm named Gibson Dunn, who is a big oil law firm. They represent Transfer Energy, Dakota Access Pipeline, Line 3 Pipeline, these projects that have been majorly inhibited by tribal sovereignty. So this law firm has taken up this tribal custody case in the Supreme Court in order to challenge tribal sovereignty through the Indian Child Welfare Act. It's a very evil strategy to try to use children under tribal sovereignty, take away our ability to keep children in our communities in order to more easily permit these big oil projects. And so that's kind of this big. And there's many other implications that have to do with that. And so that's kind of what is happening. This case will be decided probably this month. So, thank you so much for allowing me.
Want to stay in touch about the case, please. Keep in touch with us, please. And our next speaker today is Carolyn Hill from Give Us Back Our Children in Philadelphia.
Hi everybody. Glad to be here again. Glad to see everybody. Well, I was a victim of DHS. They gave me 2 children, my nieces, and then after a year they took them back from me. I went to the newspaper to get some help. They sent me to Crossroads Women's Center. That's where I started my fight at Crossroads Women's Center. A mother of five. A mother of five, 17 grandchildren, and 2 are deceased. And I've been raising kids for years. You know, I'm 65 years old, still raising kids. And when DHS gave me my nieces, I was so happy about it because they was just taking all my sister kids, spreading them out. But with the 2 they gave me after a year, they took them back for no odd reason. They couldn't tell me why they took them back. They just took them back. Went to court. They lied on me. They said I was being evicted, I had mental issues, and I didn't have a GED, which I did have a GED, but I didn't need none after all the kids I had raised. And Crossroads Women's Center, I went there and we started our fight. We got our literatures, we got our petitions, we protested on the corners, we protested in front of DHS. I went to court. They supposed to have my family and my church people to come and speak on how well I was doing with the kids, but they never let them up there. My lawyer looked like he turned on me, because every time we came up with something, by the time we got to court, it was something different with them. And I haven't seen my nieces since 2013. They consider me as a low-income person, poor, and living in subsidized housing, when they gave it to a family member who was supposed to be supporting me, getting them back, ended up with them. And she owned her house, she works, so they consider the kids was better off with them because they seemed like they had more money. And ever since then, I've been at the Crossroads Women's Center. I haven't never left. I stood on. I take phone calls. I try to help people with their cases. I get so depressed when I hear people saying what they did to them, how they did it, and I know they did it because they did it to me. And I just want to say they need to stop taking our kids. It's like they're taking our kids, and these kids are angry. My son said there's 3 things out here that the politicians are doing. They're medicating us blacks, they're putting us in jail, and they're killing us. And we need to stop. They need to stop. And I wish he was here because he can talk, he can speak. He comes to me with certain things. I'm like, where do you get this from? You know, you say the forest fires. They only set these fires to build up houses. So, you know, I'm just saying how he speaks. But the welfare system, they just want to medicate these kids. These kids is angry. This is kids out here on the corner can't go back to school because if they go to school, they're going to snatch them up. They can't go back home. They're going to put their moms and parents in jail for hibernating them. They just frighten children, and they just trying to protect themselves, but they're doing it the wrong way with these guns. And how they get a hold of these guns, I have no idea. But I just want to say, I hope we can all get our kids back and let them recognize who we are, because we got kids out here don't know their family, they don't know their brother, their sister, aunts, uncle, grandparents, enough. And I have been around a lot of them that don't know who is who and what is what, and they just, seems like the kids is very confused. I have one person I've been around, child black, she's Spanish. She's teaching her Spanish first. I said, no, teach her English. Then teach her Spanish. She's not Spanish. It's confusing them. Some of them want to confuse the kids so that they can get extra money for them and put them on that medication and say they slow, they this, they that. Ain't nothing wrong with these kids. They just need some love. Tough love.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carolyn. It was really important to hear exactly what's happening right here in Philadelphia, because it's happening in other parts of the world, and you'll hear that it's happening in the UK. And you'll hear in the UK. I neglected to say who I was. So just to catch up on that, my name is Chrissy Amos. I'm based in London at the Crossroads Women's Centre in London. and I'm a member of Women of Colour in the Global Women's Strike, Women Against Rape, and I jointly coordinate Global Women Against Deportations, which is a lot of the groups that do anti-deportation work in the UK. And it's a great pleasure that I could get to introduce my sister over the border in Scotland. And so our next speaker is Micheleine Kane from the Scottish Kinship Carers Alliance in Scotland.
Good morning all. I am Shell and I am from Scotland. And can I just point out, while we are talking, our children are dying, okay? Scotland has the highest drug-related deaths in Europe, tiny Scotland, just behind US and USA. The knock-on effect is kinship care. Our children dying, us parenting again. That's life. We are unrecognised, undervalued, living in poverty, but bringing up these kids in the best and most loved environment you can. We do it out of love, but we cannot keep them on love. Nobody can keep anybody on love. We need the dollar bill, y'all, and we want the dollar bill, y'all. We fight every day in Scotland for our kids and their kids, and the fight, like yourselves, never ends. We are the underdogs, the dirty secret of care. Go to granny and shut your mouth, okay? If we get them. A family of 4 in kinship care costs the local authority, if they work, if the carer works, they get £50,000 a year. If they don't work, right, hear this, we get £38,000 a year, half. So the poor are poorer, and the better off are more better off. To keep them locked up and in residential accommodation, £1 million a year for the same family of 4 kids. That's what they cost. So we have a racketeering, money-orientated, power grab society that wants our kids. Not the damaged, not the older, the babies. That's where the money is. Adoption in Scotland, 1 per 100 babies in Scotland are adopted. A ridiculous, saddening, soul-destroying statistic that, where's the justification? Money, money. We fight. I get my granddaughter back after 13 months. And that's how I have their age. They didn't take any of mine. I fought, and I fucking fought. And I went high, 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 and higher. I used this, and I got there. And at 13 months old, I was handed back my baby granddaughter. I'll never forgive, and I'll certainly never forget. But I want to say this. Yous don't respect us, yous can fucking expect us. Because we'll be there, and we will fight, and we will show you that we are the families. You want the money? You better find other fucking kids, because you ain't getting ours. Ever. We need the solidarity. I'm so humbled to be here. I'm so humbled to have met Carolyn, my new buddy. And I'm so happy that I met, well, God, how do you follow Selma James and Margaret Prescott? No idea. I had the whole speech written out. It's done. But what I will say is this. I have so much love for everybody. And I've never felt so much love as I have here this week. And I'm so glad I came. The people I've met have been the ones distributing the food, everybody. I'm so proud. I'm so proud. And I hope I come back again if I don't get fucking deported. No? Stay laddie. I'll get in the back door somehow. But what I will do is this. We hope that we can support yous and help yous to get our kids and keep them where they belong with their fucking families.
Oh, brilliant, Shah. How'd you follow that? You're going to have to introduce the next speaker. My voice is gone.
Hi, and we're going to hear next from Andrea James, National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls from Boston. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank you for this invitation. Again, my name is Andrea James, and I'm from the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. We're headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, but we're a national organization that also does international organizing of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. This issue that we're discussing this morning is a very important issue to women who are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. There's over more, and we work at the National Council to end incarceration of women and girls. In the United States, more than 5 million children have been affected by incarceration of a parent. And this is just, an astounding number. We believe that it's much more than that, but that's what has the numbers that have mostly been documented. The Adopt and Stay Family Act didn't take into consideration the impact of incarcerated mothers on their, of the mothers or their children. If you've ever been in a prison, a women's prison, at 3 o'clock in the morning and heard the stifled cries of a mother trying to not be heard, trying to not awaken the other women sleeping around her in this prison, but just cannot hold back the pain of being separated from their children. Women who are, while mopping floors or eating in the chow hall, fall out from the pain of not being able to hold and see their children. The majority of incarcerated women are poor women. They're cash poor women. If they have access to their children in any way through a phone call or know where their children are, many of them don't see their children during the entire time of their incarceration. And so this is an issue that we care deeply about, and it's one of the reasons we started to organize ourselves in 2010 in the federal prison for women in Danbury, Connecticut, because of the separation of us from our children. The impact on children of having an incarcerated mother has significant emotional, physical, behavioral, affecting children's schoolwork, affecting their ability to concentrate, affecting the children themselves in so many ways. Depression, not just a long prison sentence, but the level of economic disruption in the family that we're experiencing in many of our communities right now is a result of shorter jail sentences that have proliferated through this country over the last 2 decades. The incarceration of women in prison, in jails, but even a shorter jail sentence because you can't pay your bail or because you're sentenced to a less than state prison sentence or federal sentence. Even those shorter sentences, a weekend in a jail, you can lose your job, you can lose your housing, There's so much loss as a result of this. And so it's catastrophic, really, the economic disruption. And then once a woman does have these laws and regulations and the stipulations as a result of the Adoption Safe Families Act, as they call it, and we are not experts on this for sure. We rely upon many of the people that are here in this audience today, and Joyce McMillan and so many other women who are formerly incarcerated, who Desiree Wright, and so many women who were incarcerated and struggled with the system that was stealing their children, particularly in the federal system where women lose contact with their children and are shipped thousands of miles away from where they live. And then also, because the proceedings all happen within a state legal system, many times women in federal prisons don't know anything about what's happening until they receive notice that their children, their parental rights have been terminated. These are the devastating effects that happen to women who are incarcerated and their children. As a result, the National Council has created a basic income guarantee program to support incarcerated mothers who receive $500 a month in support to help them. And these women, most of them, send a large portion of that money out to pay for phone calls, exorbitant fees for that, as well as to help caregivers on the outside take care of their children. We also provide mutual aid to women who are outside, who are struggling to help keep the bond and the connection between the mothers and the children, the mothers who are inside of these prisons. It's very, very difficult to bring children thousands, hundreds, even around the corner, even down the street, if you don't have money to bring children together and to travel so that they can connect and stay bonded with their mother, which is very important when we talk about reentry. The more that a woman is able to be connected to her children, the one last thing that often gives her hope to be able to survive that prison sentence and to want to move forward and advance her life as she returns home. If she doesn't have her children, it's a devastating, devastating impact on the mother herself. So clearly this is a global issue, as we can see and hear from all of the amazing panelists. And I'll just end here by saying at the National Council, we're part of the international network of formerly incarcerated women. And we were just at our conference in Colombia, and we visited the women's prison in Bogota. This is an international issue, and we must continue to work globally to stop the separation of mothers from their children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. That was, again, really positive stuff about being able to come together, because we're recognizing whether we're Black, Indigenous, of color, whatever working class sector we are, we're under attack. And we're clearly strong, and there's more of us coming together. We're going to get our children back. And we've heard that some women have done that, and we intend to carry on doing it. Our next speaker again is online speaker, Mora Villalpando, from La Resistencia, USA. Let's welcome Maru.
Hi, good morning. Buenos días. My name is Mora Villalpando. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm based in Seattle, Washington. It's the Amish land. I'm originally from Mexico City, and I work with many other immigrants to stop detentions and deportations in Washington State and in the entire country. And as we heard from all the speakers, this is an issue that resonates, especially with people of color, low-income people. But if you add to that, immigration status. So throughout the world, we in the Global South were not only taking away our dignity, our language, our faith, our land, our resources, we're also taking away the fact that we could migrate and go to those countries that took everything from us and come back the creditors, right? That's what at the end of the day we are doing, going to the global north, trying to find what it was taken from us. And in that process throughout the years, here in the US, the immigration system has been taking away our children. So this is nothing new. A lot of people think of the Trump years as to the years of the separation of families, but this process has been happening forever since the US took over the native lands. And so what we're seeing today is just the immigration system created a detention system. This is civil law. This is not criminal law. So in the US, to be undocumented is not a crime. It's actually just a civil penalty. That's why the prisons for immigrants are not called prisons. They're called detention centers. That's why we don't get lawyers, because you have to pay for your own lawyer. But what happened is that the immigration detention system exploded after 9/11 because it was the perfect formula to privatize the detention system. And the detention system became just an extension of the prison system in the US, which in itself is an extension of slavery. So how to control people of color. And in this case, is how to control our communities. Since 1997, there's a legal case in the Supreme Court that does not allow Immigration Customs Enforcement to keep children more than 1 to 2 weeks in detention. This is since 1997. So that means that way before then, the US had been detaining children. And so what we have nowadays is a huge extension of detention, not only detention centers that are mainly privatized, but also nonprofits that do profit from the detention of children. There's a big network of them throughout the United States. And so what we saw during the Trump years was the criminalization of parents just trying to come into the US. And what the Trump administration did is to use a law that is in the books. It's been in the books for many years. It's called 1326. And it says that if you can file a criminal federal charge to anyone coming into the country. And so the Trump administration did just that with parents. They will file this charge and with that excuse say, well, you can keep your children because now you have a federal charge. And that's what happened in 2018 when they started separating children from their parents. Till today, there's a lot of children that have not been reunited from that time with their parents. A lot of those parents got deported. But what people missed is that since at least the early 2000s, when the privatization of deportation began, through this selling of contracts, right, to especially GUBOC Group, which is an international company nowadays that have detention centers everywhere in the world, is that parents, when they're put in deportation proceedings and putting into detention centers, are already separating their children. And so everything that we just heard about the impact on children, we see it as well with parents that are detained. So not only is the fact that children have been separated at the border or children cross by themselves for many different reasons, and they are put into a different type of detention, again, detention with nonprofits. But for those children that are here with their families are being separated through the detention of their parents. Right now, we have over 25,000 people, adults, detained in some sort of detention center, mainly privatized detention centers. And we have over 250,000 people, including family units, as they call them, under digital surveillance, which means it's a prison in your house. And wherever you go, you're being monitored and surveilled, either through an ankle bracelet, either through a watch that you have to wear 24/7 as well, or through an app phone which we don't know what kind of impact it has and how many other people are being surveilled when you're using this digital surveillance. So Immigration Customs Enforcement has really come along through using technology to surveil and monitor almost everyone that is on deportation proceedings here in the United States. So let's remember that we're not only talking about those families that came in 2018 and got separated and still have not been reunited. Let's think of everyone right now that is in a detention center. It has been separated from their loved ones, from their children, but there's also those in digital surveillance that don't engage with their children as they should because they're afraid of just being monitored themselves. So we have to fight a new technology altogether in regards to detention. And I want to thank so much to the interpreters. I know this is a hard, difficult job to be interpreting for so long. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Neale from Support Not Separation UK.
Hi, thanks so much. So just to say, over the years, groups based at the Crossroads Women's Centre in London, which was started in 1975, have worked on custody cases, in particular in the late 70s and early 80s when lesbian mums had to fight our kids. But over the last 10 years, many more mothers started coming to the groups based at the Women's Centre, in particular to Women Against Rape, to Women of Colour, to Invisible Women with Disabilities, and to the English Collective of Prostitutes. And it was mums who were fighting in family court to stop being separated from children, whether it was the state taking them into foster care or adoption, or whether it was violent fathers trying to take them away, or whether it was immigration or other racist laws which separate families, or by the separations imposed by poverty and overwork. So in 2017, we put together 50 cases of mums who'd come to us. We published them as a way, because we really wanted to start describing, quantifying, and publicizing the traumatic and discriminatory treatment of children, mothers, grandmothers, and other primary carers. And so not long after we published the dossier, we started the Support Not Separation Coalition to really bring together all the organizations who wanted to campaign to stop these arbitrary separations, and including Scottish Kinship Carers Alliance. And more recently, Invisible started its Disabled Mothers' Rights campaign, which is coordinated by Tracy, who is a mother whose disabled son was taken and fought to get him back, and Tracy is online. So for the past 6 years, we've held monthly pickets outside the Central Family Court in London, and we're looking forward to the protest outside Family Court here in Philadelphia on Monday. We hope you'll join us. We combine it with a Twitter storm. We hold monthly self-help meetings for mums and grands who want to take charge of their own cases. And we have a blog and a self-help guide. And we know from the mums who come to us that it's particularly single mums who are targeted. It's over 80% of the women have been victims of domestic violence, which is nearly always dismissed or ignored in court. 40% are women of color or immigrant women. Almost half of the women had mental health issues, which is invariably made worse by going to family court. And nearly 20% had disabilities. And over half of the mothers had children who were already separated from their children, including about 10% who'd been had adoptions, forced adoptions, and the rest are still fighting in court, as I say, mostly against abusive fathers or against the state, which was monitoring them and making life difficult. Often when mothers had actually gone to the social services to ask for support, which you are entitled to under the law. There's legislation which says you should be able to get money and other resources to keep families together. So mums quite often go for that support, but end up being pushed because there's no support, there are no resources, they say, and get pushed into child protection, and children get taken. So it was really clear that we needed to go public, because a crucial issue is that family court decisions are happening behind closed doors. And 6 years ago when we started, a lot of people had very little idea of what was actually went on in there. So opening the courts has always been a key demand, because we must expose the racism, the sexism, the class bias, the disability discrimination, which is rampant. And crucially also has been demanding recognition of the mother-child bond, that mothers are children's first protectors, and that breaking that bond by taking children does a lot more harm and causes a lot more trauma than whatever was going on in the home in the first place. And it's crucial that when mothers do ask for support, that they get the support they're entitled to, instead of, as I say, being pushed into child protection. And we very early on adopted the demand, which I think was coined by Reverend Annie from the Poor People's Campaign: take away our poverty, not our children. And that's been really crucial. And the fact that, as Sidney mentioned, in Philadelphia and in California, there's now increasing recognition that poverty is not neglect, has been a big source of support for us. And we're definitely working on that in the UK. The fact is that there's now an increasing outpouring of information from children and including from children and young people who've been in care themselves, about what actually happens when they're in care, about the abuse and neglect, and in particular, the impact of an increasingly privatized industry in which companies are making millions, if not billions, in profit from running children's homes in particular. And as people have said, in some places, local authorities are paying £1 million a year to keep a child in care. And yet mothers are getting absolutely nothing. So we're really using this outpouring to highlight how much, how much the child welfare industry is actually about controlling women and children's lives, about whether they're trying to put us back under men's control or the state control, and has got nothing to do with what's actually in the best interests of the children. And now we know how much money they're actually spending. We're demanding that this money go to mothers and other primary carers. That's why we're calling for a care income for all mothers and carers of people and planet. So, but we have seen big changes in the climate since we started. The climate of family court. I mean, we've seen other climate changes as well, not such good ones. But it's been a big power working internationally with our sisters in Give Us Back Our Children, and with the Every Mother is a Working Mother Coalition in Philly and California. And we're looking forward also to hearing more about the work of the welfare warriors who've been battling these issues for decades. And Pat Gowans is here. We're very sorry that Saranya, who's the lawyer who was in the fantastic film, which I really recommend people see, called Mrs. Chatterjee v. Norway, which tells the story of a mum who fought for, an Indian mum who was living in Norway. State took her kids for totally racist reasons, and she fought for 3 years to get them back. It's now on Netflix, which is a big power, and the lawyer who was going to be here today was unable, it was going to be online today, was unable to because of a family bereavement. But it's clear that the international movement is really growing and expanding. And there's much more to say about the victories that we've had along the way, whether in individual cases or getting official reports, including from the United Nations, which have taken mother's side or have at least exposed what's happening in state institutions. So we're really looking forward to exchanging information and experiences with everyone here today.